Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the Wargame Red the Dragon tank tier list. Last time we left off at the K1A1. I do not believe there was anything worth talking about. Actually, I think someone was mentioning... Hold on, let me actually... once again, completely prepared, of course. I think someone was saying... Well, first of all, there was a comment about K1A1 being sad, just wait until the CDC 85-3 comes. And let me put it that way, I think you might actually be a bit surprised. Yeah, someone said they gotta disagree with the Kyu-Maru 4, saying that it's actually amazing for flank defense and even filling out the front line. The Sheridan 2M is great at ambushing aggressive helicopters from Ts with how fast the salvo fires. Additionally, it pairs well with the Keiler APC, as seeing rapid firing salvo manpads coming from forest position can scare off helos. And then something else. There was a Kyu-Maru 4. I can see where they're coming from, but you have 30% accuracy and 2100 meter range against helicopters. You get outranged by MTVs, for example, who have 2275 meters on the rocket pods. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, one shouldn't underestimate these manpads. But even if you take away the manpads, the tank isn't amazing. Like, I put it in C tier. I'm pretty sure, yeah, in C tier. I'm not saying it's like garbage. But the thing is, with these high AP fairly squishy tanks, which it is due to everyone just using mediums and above and rarely anything below, 12 armor isn't quite a lot. You still can get one shot. You have 6 RPM and you're not very fast, so you can't really hunt down enemies like you can with the Leopard Ace1+, for example. So even without the Strela, this isn't a particularly good tank. And the Strela 2M, again, it's nice and all, but it doesn't suddenly transform the tank into something amazing. But again, once more, if you like the tank, I'm not telling you shouldn't like it or you shouldn't use it anymore. That is not the point of these lists. So, if I put something in E and say it's absolute garbage, then and you really like the unit, then don't read into this as me telling you to stop using those units. First and foremost, you should have fun when playing Wargame. Anyway, we left off at the K1A1. So let's continue with the KPz T-70 Keiler. Actually, the only, I believe, West German tank with the KPz in its name, which I assume is mainly due to it just being a prototype. Fun fact, an incredible amount of money went into this from both the US and West Germany, but a lot of it also could essentially be salvaged, a lot of the knowledge could be salvaged into what later became the Leopard 2, and you can also see the L44 120mm gun developed for this carried over to the Leopard 2. Enough about the tank. How is it in game? It's interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but 10 RPM autoloaded is great. An autocannon with a good rate of fire, not the best accuracy. It used to have the same accuracy as the Marder 1 until the Marder 1 and VAP T20 and some others got buffed. But this autocannon did not receive the buff, unfortunately. But it's still a good autocannon, don't get me wrong, right? Highest rate of fire autocannon you can have. And same with that, like I said, Marder 1 or the BVP M80A used by Yugoslavia. It's great, you got lots of ammo, which, with 10 RPM, not a huge deal, but yeah. Also worth noting, this is genuine 10 RPM with 6 seconds reload time straight until you're empty. So no semi-autoloader shenanigans here. You have okay mobility, you have medium optics, which is great. 15 AP isn't the best, although you have full range. You have acceptable accuracy. You don't really lose much when it comes to the stabilizer, which I find very interesting. Funnily enough, you could argue that it should have much lower stabilizer, because with the way the KPz T-70 was designed, the driver was actually in the turret. So, I guess this doesn't have to do much with the stabilizer, but the driver sitting in the turret usually ended up having some issues in regards to not feeling well. Yeah, but 15 AP, 12 armor. I mean, if you compare this with, you're not gonna see this very well here because of the tier list, but I can just do it like this, right? For the same price, not autoloaded RPM, the Leopard 1A5 A2 gets 2 AP for quote-unquote free, a lot more accuracy as well. Obviously, you lose the autocannon, you lose the autoloader, which both of them are very significant. You also get a good bit more side armor, which is also significant. You still get a one shot to the side by spikes, but the Leopard, basically any Leopard 1 that isn't the Mexas, and even the Mexas isn't amazing, but all the Leopard 1s can get very easily side shot by anything. Autocannons would just murder Leopard 1s to the side, so that is not to be underestimated. Still though, 15 AP and 12 front armor for 70 points is pretty weak. Which isn't inherently a problem because its main purpose is medium to close range fire support and IFV killing stuff. Going up against tanks is nice enough, but it's what you should avoid. Still though, the 13 armor just holds it back. The 12 armor holds it back because you get killed fairly easily. Even by 26 AP will one-shot you. A lot of infantry will go up against one-shot you. Even like the 16 AP loss used by Rovite 90 and Yakari 90 will do significant damage to you. They will kill you with 4 shots. If you had 3 armor, they would need 5 shots. So it is pretty squishy for what it's supposed to do. So if it had 12 AP and 15 armor, it would be quite interesting. Probably significantly better, although it would be, I wouldn't say next to useless, but very, very, very weak against tanks. But a lot more interesting and, in my eyes, stronger. But just a fairly low front armor coupled with the roll it kind of has to do makes it just awkward to use. So yeah, and that's why it will be C tier. But it can certainly be a fun tank. So yeah, KPz both of the M48s, I'm gonna do them in one go. No, you get either lower AP and a Browning or higher AP and an MG3. So no, you trade AP for HE output. Not very good, honestly. They might genuinely be E tier because they have only 5 armor. They're not particularly fast. They don't have a particularly good rate of fire for 25 points. They have good accuracy. And this one has a Browning, but they're pretty squishy. There's just nothing particularly good about it. They're also big, which generally isn't a huge deal, but there's just, I don't see like a single thing where I'm like, yeah, that makes this tank good. But I mean, in the end, like I'm not even sure if you will see any tank in E tier here, because the fact is any tank that has like acceptable armor and with the gun is in some way or not useful, you know. And also immediately I've been proven wrong about the only West German tank with KPz in the name, was literally quite immediately below the Keiler. God, these names, dude. This is M and not a K. Jesus Christ. Imagine if the German Leopards had like proper names, like Leopard 1A1 A3 and shit like that. T-34. Also D tier, honestly. I tried making it work, right? 15 points, 3 armor isn't too bad. You get a 50 cal, albeit a low accuracy one. You know, if you compare it to the the Browning, you lose accuracy 5%, which if you 10 to 15%, obviously a huge deal. And like I said, especially on lower end tanks that you spam, do not underestimate the power of MGs. But on top of that, not particularly good range. The actually acceptable accuracy, 40%, is pretty good for 15 points. Like higher than like some red tanks. T80 wants to talk with you. Or does the T80 maybe actually have 40? In any case, T80 is bad. Back to this T-34, but a 6 RPM heat. You generally don't want heat, although you have a better round than the aim. Can we just talk about the T-34? Actually, now that I talk about it, I think I vaguely remember a hardcore French fanboy being very much annoyed about the AMX30 having a worse AP than the T-34 on the forums, now that I think about it. But yes, better AP than that. Still, it's just not worth running. Because the thing is, with fire support, not only do you have to kill infantry, especially if you go into the 15-point range, right? There's a big difference between 15 and 10 points. But if you go into the 15 points range, you still want to be like acceptable versus IFVs and light armor. Because nowadays fire support doesn't just have to kill infantry most of the time, but they also have to be a threat, at least towards IFVs, and the T-34 just isn't that, because sure you will two-shot 2 armor, but a lot of fire support isn't even 2 armor these days, right? You have the M113s, you have the BTRTs, you have the BVPs, you have the Maru 2s. Yeah, sometimes you see the KFV25. You still have 2 armor with the Zeldas or the Shanxi transport, although nobody plays Red Dragons, or nobody tryhards with Red Dragons. They're still around, but you will at least one-shot KTs, but I think on the average KTs will still win versus you. But it's just, once again, they're also not particularly fast, right? And the speed can, on cheap fire support, the speed can definitely be a factor that helps quite a bit. T-55A in a similar thing, I also tried this as like my cheap fire support, akin to the Centurion. You have lower armor with only 7, so you do get one-shot by spikes, which is unfortunate. We have a 50 cal, again the bad one. You only have bad optics, not even poor, so, you know, bad is worse than poor, in case you're curious, because they're both red, so sometimes you might not know that for certain. But if you compare these two, right, you get a more powerful gun, but you lose 2 armor. You get the worse MG, but you have acceptable speed. But I think having only 7 armor is really, really bad. That means that close range tanks are going to be much, much stronger. But I think with 50 kmh, it's not like with the cheap fire support where you would have to get much, much closer to make use of it, because you have acceptable range and accuracy and you have decent armor. You don't need speed as much. You would still prefer higher speed, but 50 kmh, I think at this price point is acceptable. I think in armor you can certainly, I wouldn't say like rely on it necessarily as like a main fire support unit, but make it work to a certain extent. I'm just gonna like, you know, I said it, this goes for all T-55As, of course, right? T-55A1 PB, it has good accuracy. Has 9 armor now and more range, but once again, this is like the type of tank that this is a tank that you'd use to killing IFVs essentially, and like aim makes sense and like ideally. However, these tanks would have to be fairly self-sufficient, because you would use these at low intensity flanks, low intensity front lines, or parts of the front line, I should say. But with low speed and the poor optics, it's just nigh impossible to do that. On top of having like a horrible stabilizer, so if you have to retreat, your gun is virtually useless as well, unless you're firing on a close range. This just makes it very, very awkward. And unfortunately, due to the way the game is played, many of these tanks in this price range just aren't particularly good. Granted though, I don't even know the last time I used this, but I also just don't quite see the point in using this. You know, I might underrate it, but it's maybe it's actually C tier, but yeah. This thing is in a similar boat. You get more AP, you get more armor, you get a Bastion, which is not too horrible. Well, let me check the speed of the Bastion real quick. T-55A M2 PB. Oh, FYI, I opened the armor tool before starting to record, so I don't have to. So the speed of it is pretty fast. It's still the same speed as the Archon, is it not? Yep, same speed as the Archon, which is, by the way, also the same speed of the Spike, excluding the Spike used by the Maglans, which are a bit slower, or start out a bit slower. So yeah, the same speed as the Archon, same speed as the Spike LR. So pretty fast at HGM. You still pay 55 points. But the problem is, once you're out of the 40 GMs, the tank just isn't very good anymore. You're slow, 10 armor, 15 AP, not maximum range, virtually no stabilizer, 8 RPM that isn't auto-loaded. It's still the basic Dishka, although, you know, at this price range, Dishka or NSVT is not gonna be a significant difference. The other thing is, just with 17 AP, you're not going to be punching a lot above your weight. Once again, the tanks you're going to go up against most of the time will rarely have less than 13 and the most used 13 armor tank is a T80 on top of that. So most of the tanks you see are actually gonna have like 14 or 15 armor, so you're not gonna do a whole lot of damage, especially given your 40% accuracy. Yeah, I don't. Maybe it's C tier once again, but I don't think it's particularly good. Oh boy, here we go. T-72s. T-72 base. Not the biggest fan. It has 7 RPM 4 HE, so it has acceptable HE output, better HE output than 8 RPM 3 HE by the T-55s. Although the cheapest T-72 is also 45 points versus 25 points of the T-55A. You get the NFCT with a better thing. You are auto-loaded now. You're fast, or relatively fast with 60 kmh. You have very good autonomy. Good armor all around. 6 armor on the basic T-72 is pretty good. You still of course get one shot to the side by spikes, but yeah. They have 11 armor for 45 points isn't too bad. You will survive a VDV shot at the front at least, but Erics and anything above will one-shot you. You're gonna get 2 shots from 19 AP onwards, so most notably 20 AP with the Carl Gustav M3 or 21 AP with True Mats and spikes. It is not horrible. I think it's in the same vein of the T-55A that it's not gonna like be amazing if you have to rely on it as your main fire support or something, but it can certainly do the job at times. And I think the T-72M fills a similar role. I played a lot with this recently in my Eastern Bloc tank. I'm still not a big fan of this tank, but that is mainly due to the fact that Eastern Bloc just doesn't have any like genuinely good tank below the M1 Wilk, which really hurts the deck and just doesn't fit the flavor as well in my eyes, because Eastern Bloc flavor is essentially Jack of all trades, master of none, especially like in the low and mid end, technology wise, if you get what I mean. So, outside of LSTR, for example, or like a very few units, they're very mid-range, right? They don't have like Patriots, Longbows, Tigers, stealth here, stealth there, exceptional optics, most modern ATGM. They very rarely have stuff like this, and that's fine. But the problem is when not even the thing that they're supposed to be good, they're not even good anymore because DLC power creep and Eastern Bloc nerfs. T-72M1, one of the best, if not the best support tank, by the way. So if you're playing mixed red for support, you actually have an acceptable tank. It's a bit underrated. It's certainly not amazing, especially if you compare to the Mexas, that loses 1 AP but gains 2 RPM for 10 points lower. A bit sad if you think about it. But in and of itself, in a vacuum, the M1 isn't really that horrible. I mean, once again, if you compare to the M1 Wilk, now for 5 points you get 1 armor and 1 RPM. Amazing, right? But both the Wilk and the Mexas, they're in a league of their own, outside of a few other tanks. So it's in a vacuum, the M1 isn't actually that horrible. Out of all the T-72 M1s, out of which this one is the unique one, every other one is the same. This is actually playable. Ignoring if DLC wasn't around, it would be I think some decks would actually be happy with this. In fact, I honestly, I think if Germany or Eurocore or something like that had this tank, they'd be happy and you'd see this tank. Because 8 RPM autoloaded with decent AP and acceptable front armor, not too shabby. I definitely prefer this over the Leopard 2A1 and the base Leopard. T-72S1 and the S, for 5 points you get the sphere. I believe you also get better availability. They're just decent heavy tanks. They're not amazing, they don't have the best accuracy for the price, but they're fairly survivable. 18 armor once again. I think I said this with the K1A1, not the best threshold, but you're also much cheaper, right? So it's not that big of a loss if you lose one, and they're not as big of ATGM magnets. I would always go for the S because 5 points for a sphere is good, Sphere for 125 points is not the best ATGM anymore. Like on tanks like the T-72B or M1M, they're much more noticeable because you have more of those tanks and they really punch above their weight. Especially against like other medium tanks, they will do a lot of damage. And of course, you know, essentially, well, at this price range, right, 5 points for a sphere, you know, obviously you take the deal. But once again, the availability is also different. And this one is available in mech. But they're decent tanks. There's nothing really to complain about. They're like not outstanding in any way, except for the fact that they have above average acceleration and deceleration, with a value of 30 instead of 25, which I assume is something like in-game range units per second. I don't know. They have just slightly higher acceleration and deceleration than basically any other tank with a turret, because turretless tanks generally have much higher acceleration to offset the fact that I have no turret. I believe that's probably the reason. As well as a few other tanks, but it's a whole different story. Kyu-Maru Shiki. This is very interesting. Well, pseudo super heavy. I say pseudo super heavy because similarly to the Leclerc, when it comes to raw AP and armor, it is on the low end, on the lowest end of, you know, all the super heavies. Although then again, it depends on what you count as a super heavy. Some people still call like the M1A1 HC and the 20 a super heavy. Some people don't. There's no real nomenclature, no proper nomenclature for that. For me, this is a super heavy. For me, the HC and 20 are not super heavies. So yeah. Out of all the super heavies, the squishiest one, for the most part. You could argue the Leclerc is squishier because while it has 1 more front armor, it has only 7 side armor, so it will get one shot by spikes to the side. You get 2 cards of this, even 3 per card in Japan National, if you want to really go all out. You need to babysit it a lot more than other super heavies, but I think especially in the current meta, not quite as much as Leclerc, but nearly as much as Leclerc, it fares pretty well because a lot of people just use medium tanks these days, in 1v1s that is. And against medium tanks, you don't need as much AP, and while you still have like full AP and you lose armor, the RPM especially helps, and you will 2-shot M84As or like 15 armor at maximum range, which is nice. The autonomy though is what really holds it back. That on top of, you know, having below average armor for the price, but the gun, the RPM auto-loaded, so nice, can make for some really nice plays. But it's one of the most micro-intensive super heavies, I'd say, because, you know, just a lot more squishy, and you have to really keep an eye out on this autonomy. But if you're good, if you can make it work, it can really pay off. Leclerc easy S tier. It is very fast. It has a 21 front armor, which while you have 7 side armor, I would always prefer an extra front armor, because if you get shot into the side, there's a good chance you're dead anyway, or nearly dead. And yeah, you lose 1 AP, but also how ugly is that model? But you know, extra speed, good autonomy, perfect stabilizer, not a big deal. You have 3 per card as well for no good reason. It's just one of the best super heavies in the current meta, which is kind of funny because Eurocore doesn't even use super heavies in 1v1s that much anymore, depending on who plays it, just because it's so much more about just tigers and peace runs and AMX sense. Just shows how ridiculous those units are. And that is what's even funnier, is that I was one of the latest believers into the tiger. Leopard 1 and L. Now we go into all those Leopard 1s, huh? Or Leopards in general. 30 points, 10 RPM, kinetic, 6 front armor, 308 MG. This is 7.62mm is .308, right? 0.308, whatever. Just like 50 cal is 12.7mm, I think. Someone enlighten me. I'm too lazy to Google it. It's just in a similar vein as like the T-55A and like the base T-72. It is faster than the T-55A and the T-72. A similar armor with 6 versus 7. 10 RPM gun, good accuracy, you know. It's just squishy, very squishy. Like 2 side armor, it's like virtually nothing. Also, I'm like fairly certain there shouldn't be a. Oh no, actually, I guess all of them have a space between the denomination and the NL part. 1V is just a straight up worse AS1 plus, is it not? Because the AS1 plus has like 1 extra AP. Yeah, it's literally the same. You even lose accuracy in the MG. I forgot. The MG3 gets like 10% extra accuracy in stabilizer for no good reason. Yeah, it's a straight up worse AS1 plus, and honestly, no joke, I think that 1 AP quite hurts it. And while I would already also say that the AS1 plus is kind of in a low-ish tier of B, I think that one AP loss genuinely brings the 1V a tier lower. Whoa, Leopard 1A2. It's gonna be the same as the NL, so I'm just gonna skip it. From now on, I'm just not gonna do this. But it's virtually the same. You're not gonna write it down again. Sorry, but like 1A4 is actually a nice tank. Genuinely B tier. It's just it fills the same role as a Marder 2 in a certain extent. And that is once again, you know, this same old story of low intensity flanks and front lines. It has medium optics at good range, amazing accuracy, good rate of fire, acceptable armor. Did I already say medium optics? If I already did, whatever. Just, you know, in Eurocore and any German deck, you just use the Marder 2 instead because it does it just a tad better most of the time. But for that role, it's a very good tank. And 40 points for medium optics and this kind of gun. It's very good. And of course you have the AMX 10, so it's just, yeah. 1 in 5. For 10 points you get, essentially for 10 points you get 2 front armor compared to the AS1 plus. Not worth it. It's just not worth it. In most situations you're gonna be just as squishy as before. Yes, you're gonna survive an Appalachia to the front, but that's not where a tank is supposed to be in the first place. You're not gonna hunt down infantry with this thing. Like close range quarters, you're gonna try to like bully tanks with these kind of tanks, medium tanks. You drive up to them and try to bully them by just outnumbering them. And the 1A5 at 65 points with only 10 armor and like this side armor. The thing is like also rocket pods just bully Leopard once because with the splash damage they will also hit side armor as well. Even if they shoot at it up front. So 1A3 DK. This is a Leopard 1A4 just with worse optics, and honestly, this makes it a whole tier lower. The medium optics are such a big deal. Because people, I'm gonna say this now. This is gonna be, especially with the Leopard 2, this is gonna be an issue. The thing with the medium optics, right? Very often people say, "Oh, you should have recon there anyway, or other units with medium optics. You know, you shouldn't just leave your tank alone." Blah blah blah. I can see where they're coming from, and it certainly makes sense. You know, their argument. However, you have to keep in mind, very often, and I mean very often, if you push up a tank, and there's recon next to it that you also push up with, unless the recon is literally on the, literally in front of your tank, you know, it will very often happen that you're getting shot at from a bush or from a forest that your tank has line of sight to, but the recon doesn't. So the recon doesn't spot it because 50 meters to the left or the right of the tank, and the forest that it's shooting from is like, you know, angled in a way, so the edge of the forest isn't angled, so the line of sight from the recon or the tank that's shooting at you is so much deeper into the forest from the line of sight of the recon. So this happens very often that the supporting optics, so to say, of your tanks do not have line of sight on what's shooting at them due to some obstruction or whatever. It happens way more often than you might think, and that's why these medium optics are so important. Plus, of course, what happens if your recon dies, right, or gets shot at, or something else. So yes, the medium optics are a huge deal. 1A5 TK is just the same as the 1A5, but it looks cooler. That's a new Leopard, but I mean it's more or less the same story as the other like cheap ass Leopards, you know. The problem is not necessarily how good or bad they are, it's just how unimportant that role is. This is probably the most interesting Leopard For 45 points, you get 15 AP, but not full range, no medium optics. I'm still not 100% certain how I feel about this. Like 45 points, 15 AP is actually really good, and 10 RPM of course as well. You don't have a very good stabilizer and accuracy though. You will need to get close, but then again, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You don't really need the medium optics on this kind of tank, and don't really expect it at 45 points. It would be nice to have, but you don't need it for what this is supposed to be. And this is, once again, like the AS1 Plus, just a close range bullier. But the AS1 Plus has essentially 2 more AP, right? 1 base, and of course 1 through the extra range it has. And then of course it's the whole extra accuracy and all that. But it's also 10 points more, right? I'm gonna be spicy here and put this in B tier. Once again though, you don't see this because you just have Housekeeping at 90 in your and even in just Norway, not even just Scandi, but you know, this is a Norwegian tank, so this is just a Leopard 105. NO2. Oh yeah, exclamation point A, exclamation point NO, by the way. 105 NO2. I'm gonna put this in B tier. I'm not a huge fan, but it is not too horrible. It does have only 12 armor, but it does have 17 AP with 10 RPM. It's fast, good accuracy, good range, you know. So it's not too horrible. Did I earlier say that? I earlier said that the Mexas is 70 points. It is not 70 points, it's 80 points. Which makes the T-72M1 actually less sad. And not that bad. Even less bad than I thought it might be. Anyway, Leopard 2. Here we go. Not a very good medium. It is acceptable, it's not horrible, but it's just not very good. And 80 points for no medium optics is just very big oof. Very big oof. At this price range, just not being self-sufficient enough to not even have medium optics, it massively hurts the tank. On top of that, like 16 AP, 15 armor is not the best, you know, variation when it comes to like AP and armor distribution, front armor distribution. 9 RPM, that is not loaded, but I mean, it's fine. Accuracy, stabilizer, speed, you know, all fine, but 16 AP, 15 front armor, 9 RPM, it is not loaded. It's just not quite good enough, and especially not without medium optics. It's by no means like a horrible tank, but it's just let down by a few little things. 2A1 is just a very average medium. I'm kind of hesitant to put this in B tier, but if I look at all these C tier tanks, the 2A1 is certainly a step above them. When it comes to like the medium tanks that you see frequently these days, the 2A1 is the worst one. 16 armor is not a very good threshold. 18 AP is good, but for 100 points, not quite good enough anymore. You do get a one shot by 30 AP, i.e. like 27M, Syria, you name it, Gallop. But I mean, it's still fast, right? It has medium optics, good accuracy, good stabilizer, 9 RPM. Yeah. 2A4, probably the best German tank actually. Tier 4 tier, pound for pound. Easy A tier. 19 armor, 19 AP is a very good distribution. You're quite tanky. You will survive 30 AP. You will survive a peace run. You will survive, yeah, I mean, and thus you will survive a double tapping of anything that is below 26 AP as well. 19 AP means you will scale to exactly 30 AP at forest range. It is a very good medium tank. It's just very good all around. Nothing to complain about, really. 2A5. People might. Okay, I'm gonna say it straight. I'm gonna put this into the. I'm going to put this into the C tier. But Razzmann, everybody puts the 2A5 into the decks. Yes, I mean, first of all, not everyone, but for team games, certainly yes. But you have to keep in mind, when it comes to the super heavies, this is one of the worst ones. But the fact is just, it's still a super heavy, right? But it's just nothing extraordinary about it. It's just your average super heavy. That's it. The Moderna, 3 per card, and has an autocannon. Autoloaded. Also has lower armor, lower rate of fire, and accuracy. M1 mod, lower armor but autoloaded. And those are probably the only two that I would consider worse than a 2A5. Look at Leclerc, look at Kyu-Maru. They're kind of specialized. They have the extra RPM and whatnot. Look at the M1A2 24AP, Challenger 2, 23 armor. Merkava 3 bass, stabilized full range ADGM plus 10 RPM. Oh baby. Look at the T90, autoloaded 4HE. Look at the T-72BU, autoloaded 4HE, Sphere. Look at the Vihor, 10 RPM, very fast. You know, the 2A5 is just, you know, it's just still a super heavy. And if you look at the legend, right, it says D tier units that are only really used if they are. Is this visible? Yes. Units that are only really used if they fill an important role, but there's no other alternative. Which the 2A5 isn't, because, you know, to be in this, to be D tier, it would have to have, like, I don't know, 40% accuracy or something, you know. But it's just better than that. But I wouldn't say in and of itself it is a strong super heavy. Then again, if you were to argue that I shouldn't do this based on roles in a sense, then any super heavy would essentially be S tier for the most part, because we take team games into account. But in and of itself, the 2A5 just and maybe I will do some let me do this. If a unit name is written in red, then it is no. A unit name written in red indicates it being how do I write this down? Hold up, I'm just gonna pause this to not embarrass myself even more. There we go, I wrote something down. You can read the full thing if you open the tab. Basically, you know, it's explaining what I said earlier. And you should, I mean, you know, I think tank tab is probably tank and infantry tabs are obviously the two tabs, or maybe how full it is. The two tabs where within a tab you have significantly different roles. And you know, you could make an argument for there being more than just Leopard 2A5 here, or maybe I should do this in infantry as well. However, I feel like I'm only gonna do this like for the most important, most standing out things. If you could argue that, you know, I should, like, all the Leopard 1s, all the T-55s or something, I should essentially mark because they're only that low because that whole role is just not very seen yet. Within the role, some may be significantly stronger, but at the end of the day, you could do this endlessly. But let me know what you think. If all of you think no, also very is more or less by default B tier or higher or something, then sure, I can do that. But I hope you understand what I mean with this, or I hope you know, yeah. 2A1 NL we went over. 2A4 NL is a slightly different 2A4. I'm also gonna put this in A tier, though I would say that in a 1 versus 1 the base Leopard 2A4 is much better because you don't really need the AP. But in team games I would say that NL is probably more useful because it's a lot more about the heavy tanks there. 2A5 we already went over. C1, that's the same as the DK, I believe, except with the WRSA, but boohoo. C2 is basically a better Leopard 1A5, and yeah, for the same price you just get 1 extra AP. And funnily enough, that puts it in B tier again, because now you can actually, with the 17 AP, you can much more use it as longer ranges and actually make use of the 10 armor. Mexas, easy S tier, one of the best medium tanks in the game. Similarly to a tank that we'll get later too, maybe not this episode, but you know, just not as impactful due to the deck it is in. Yeah, nobody plays Commonwealth because Commonwealth is trash. but the Mexas is amazing, like absolutely amazing. And to a similar extent, nobody really pays Norad. Not because it's trash, but because USA is just better most of the time. Vihor. Now, if you compare this to Leopard 2A4, right, you trade 1 armor for 1 AP and get 1 RPM for free, and an autoloader, and 4 HE, and 50 cal, and speed, and autonomy. But honestly, at least in 1 versus 1, so maybe even team games, I'd still prefer the 2A4, because at 19 armor threshold is, to me, more important. Still though, pound for pound, the Vihor is still really good. That 80 kmh, with that autonomy as well. Like, if you look at the, before Yugoslavia DLC, the really fast tanks, it was like, what, the Leclerc and the T-80UM. And the T-80UM has just horrible autonomy, right? I mean, not horrible, but like, bad, pretty decently bad, like with 450 kilometers, I believe. But honestly, it's still very good. It's still very good. 91A. Similar extent, right? If you compare it to a Leopard 2A5, trade 1 armor for 1 AP for 1 RPM. A good trade in my eyes, because very often these days super heavies fight other super heavies at fairly close range. So that 1 extra AP loss is more often than not that big of a deal. 10 RPM can be nice if you have to deal with medium tanks where you prefer the RPM over like 1 or 2 AP. And of course, once again, that incredible speed. Makes it also also helps the survivability, right? Makes it go back into cover faster and all that jazz. You can hunt on super heavies or under tanks more. 10 side armor, it's pretty good. 4 top armor now as well. Yeah, but I don't think it makes it S tier. It is very good super heavy, but I don't think it is S tier. M1 Abrams, ooh, such a good, like, I mean, it's technically not really light, but price-wise, light-ish tank. It's like in a limbo between light and medium tank, when it comes to the price. But like 65 points, 2 MGs, medium optics, 15 armor, 75 kmh. Not the best autonomy, but with that speed, that's certainly acceptable. And 13 armor, 13 AP isn't very good, but you have good accuracy and you don't need to kill tanks. I mean, in forest, you will still be a threat to tanks, especially medium tanks. At forest ranges, you will get 23 AP, so anything with 15 armor and lower, you will 2-shot there. So certainly a threat to like 84As there. Not necessarily on 1-on-1 because then they'll win, but yeah. It's just such a good support tank. I would not disagree, or not inherently like vehemently disagree if you said it's S tier. Yeah, M1IP. It's still a decent tank. It's not amazing, but it's decent. You still like a very good armor for the price. Still very fast. You have medium optics. VDV will need 3 shots now to kill you. So if you expect to go up, like if you have a US deck and you're playing against Soviets, you could certainly make a point when it comes to like switching from the M1 to the M1IP, especially if you're fighting, let's say, on hell in a very small place where it's very close quarter rangey. So you will go up against a lot of VDV. Then you might want to use the IP actually. But most of the time, at that price range, it's quite expensive for not really being very good against other tanks. And outside of like very close range, just not a huge threat either. But it's still pretty decent, honestly. Just the worst K1, you lose 1 range step and you lose 1 armor. Is the K1 also 75 kmh actually? No, it's just 70. Oh, there's a bit more back armor. But actually a bit more accuracy stationary, but of course with the range scaling at close range, not necessarily anymore. M1A1. It's not horrible, right? 17 armor is okay. You get 19 AP, you're 9 RPM. Only 65 kmh now. I mean, it's still decently fast. You still have the 2 MGs, of course. Autonomy is still not particularly amazing. You actually lose 5 kilometers from the base M1. Okay. It's fine. It's not amazing, but it's usable for sure. It's somewhere like between B and C. I think it's honestly still B tier. Like if you want an affordable tank in US that packs a punch, the M1A1 can serve decently. It'll do a decent job. But then you might think, well, compared to the 84A for 20 points you get 2 armor. Yes, but the 84A is also fucking ridiculously OP, okay? H.A. Abrams, very, very funny looking in it. Just honestly very similar to a 2A4, just a bit better. I prefer this over the 2A4, though you do lose speed and most notably autonomy. But you get 1 more IP, you get 1 more armor, you get 50 cal on top, and if you have the skin pack installed or the mod installed, then you get like this fancy looking camo. Let me just show it to you. Look at this camo. So yeah, it's very, very solid, like heavy tank. M1A2 A tier. Yes, there's a 24 AP will not really be that impactful often because it just means that you reach a 30 AP scale earlier, but at long range or at like near, not necessarily maximum range, but like relatively close to maximum range, it will give you the edge over other super heavies on 1-on-1 basically all the time. And you might think it's just 1 more AP compared to the 2A5, so maybe the 2A5 should just be B tier, but it really sets it apart. Of course, it also helps that you have better top armor against clusters and such. You have the extra MG, so you are, and once again, don't underestimate F50 cals. Yeah. M24. What the hell is that thing? You get 2 front armor. You get bad speed, piss poor autonomy. You get 4 AP with 50 meter range at 6 RPM. You know what? No. Honestly, it doesn't deserve E tier, but the 4 AP is just insulting. So actually, it doesn't deserve E tier. Holy shit! Like, yes, it's just in points, but it's fucking 4 AP, dude. It's fucking 4 AP. I don't care if it's kinetic. You have such horrible range, you're not even gonna get proper range scaling. M41A1, I really used to like this unit, but everyone has IFVs out of their bazoo now, so the M41 just dies to everything. It's still decent. Still decent cheap power support. Has horrible autonomy, but the speed really helps to make up for that. So it's not really that bad compared to, let's say, the M36 that also has bad autonomy, but also bad off-road speed. You get a 50 cal, which is nice, 8 RPM, only 2 AG though, and only 8 AP, so you will really struggle against enemy IFVs, and that really hurt the unit. In the past, right, when people used just a lot more straight up infantry to fight infantry, a lot less fire support, both direct and indirect. The M41 was much stronger. These days, it's just not that strong anymore. But honestly, it's still pretty good. Especially the recon type version, which we'll get to once we get there. Another M41 Scorpion light tank. Heat, 10 AP, 7 RPM. Blah. The gun is just, ugh. I mean, you are fast, you're small. That's it. Scorpion 90. 55% accuracy at that range. 13 AP. Not gonna do much with only 2 armor. Scorpion 90. Another one of those, but only 20. Hold on for a second. You have less range and less AP, but I mean, you're still just as bad. I mean, you're actually better, I would say. Honestly, I'd consider this better, but it's still bad. Honestly, it's still bad. Same with this one. I don't even know if this is no, it's not the same as the German one, is it? Maybe it is actually. I don't know, it has a bigger gun now, but it retains the 50 cal, which the German one with the 105mm did not. I don't know why I gave this a 2 here. Another one. This is the same as a German one. I'm not gonna rate this. This is... How many fucking M48 versions are there? This is just bad. It's still 5 armor. It's 5 freaking armor. Next one is spicy though. Like 17 AP. I'm gonna give this straight C tier. It still has 5 armor. It still has no stabilizer, which hurt it a lot. But like 17 armor, full range for 45 points. You can do some meme shit. I wouldn't seriously use this because it's just so goddamn squishy and has no medium optics. Once again, no stabilizer, pretty bad speed and all that jazz, but that's 17 MP full range for this price. It's just hilarious. I refuse to rank you. I'm not even gonna check if you're a stat copy. M60A1 US Marine Corps, which I assume this stands for. If not, then, well, tough luck. I mean, it's kind of similar to like a Leopard 1, right? 10 RPM. Let's see. 35 point Leopard 1. Do we have one? Do we have one here? We do not have one. I mean, have a 40 point one here. You have no stabilizer. Come on, USA. Get your shit together. You have better armor. I mean, it's just I don't know, what would I rather use, Leopard 1 or this thing? Probably a Leopard 1, because it's also much faster. I think at this point, but I mean 9 armor for 35 points isn't too bad. But it's gonna... I don't think it's very good. Because once again, you kind of need the speed, and the stabilizer helps, like, at least, like, you know, reversing, maneuvering around. 9 armor for 35 points. It's above average, but it's not gonna really make a big change. I said it before, but the difference between having no stabilizer and a stabilizer is huge. Even though I said that the T-55A has virtually no stabilizer, but it's still better, much better than having no stabilizer at all. For 5 points, you gain a stabilizer. You don't have medium optics like Leopard 104, but you have much better armor. You also have more AP, but you still have that bad range. I think you're still not very good. Well, next one is hilarious. Like, look at the size of this gun. Hold on. Look at the size of this thing. Like, it's still a 105mm gun, right? Look at this. Look at this. Like an SU-152, dude. It's actually not that horrible, right? Sure, you only have 12 armor, but like 15 AP. It's like worse Leopard 105. Well, I mean, it's usable-ish. And it's available in Marines, which shouldn't give it a bonus, but I'm just gonna give it a bonus. Because it's a sad tank with how it looks. The camo is kind of cool, but the model itself. HC Abrams. I mean, it's an HA with 2 more AP. I guess you could call this like a pseudo super heavy. And, you know, yeah, it's decent. Good. You know what? The more I think about it, the more I think this should be actually done. I think C is oopsie. I think it's a bit disingenuous. Yeah. I still think it's one of the worst, but I think C is it's a bit much. Sheridan. It does have 5 HD for decently long range with 8 RPM. I think from what I've heard somewhere, this thing in real life has like an RPM of like 2 or 3, something along those lines. Like really bad. So the RPM is supposedly really overmodeled. Someone tell me if it's true or not, if you know. The recon version is good, the tank version is not that good, because of the 2 armor. And at long range, I mean, you're gonna fight at like fairly long range, you want to at least, because of that armor. You have medium optics, you're fast, you know, that's nice and all, but you're really gonna struggle against vehicles for the price. But, you know, if it came down to it for like long range fire support, it's not that shabby. You know, in USA and all that, you know, you have much better options, of course. But the burst damage is really nice, because sometimes you just get one shot off against infantry before it retreats or something, and then having 5 HG, like high burst damage versus high sustained damage, is gonna make a difference. Oh, the M1AJS is really fun. Easy B tier, even though you see it very rarely, but it's such a fun and underrated unit. If you manage to like micro it properly and keep it behind like infantry to screen, and pop it out when the enemy just shot or something with their tanks, just pop it out for a few seconds, get like 2 shots off and then retreat again. This can be such a fun unit, but it's very micro intensive, and you have to be very careful with artillery strikes, rocket powered helicopters and such. And maybe it only deserves C tier, but you can really make this thing work. It's just kind of a shame that the small size on tanks is just not that impactful. Because, you know, it's nice and all, but it doesn't really help the survivability that much. More M60s? It's the same fucking thing! Just 10k mage slower! What the fuck? What the fuck? Are you fucking shitting me? Just so Marines could get another... Just so the Marines could get an M60, you essentially duplicated. It even has virtually the same camo, except for like some fucking shit stains over here. What the hell? What about you? Yeah, you're kind of unique. Alright, you have good range, you have good accuracy, you have medium optics, you have 10 AP, you still have only 10 armor, but 13 AP at least. Medium optics, but no, only 13 armor. What? Okay, compared to a AS1 Plus, which is 55 points. For 5 points, you lose 2 armor. You get 3 AP. You get 1 extra range sap. Better stabilizer. More speed. And you lose side armor. And the 50 cal. But like... I give it C tier. Out of pity. Out of pity. I admit. No, I'm just joking here. Not just out of pity, but it's not that horrible. You know, once again, for like, if you have to do with IFVs on flanks, you know, you can use this thing. Medium optics, good RPM, good range, good accuracy. Super M60 kind of underrated, you know, 13 armor, 10 RPM, 15 AP. It's really not too shabby, honestly. It's just that why use this when you have the M1 Abrams? But you're fast, you have good optics. There would be decks who would very much like to have this tank. But the 13 armor really make this thing actually work. If anyone uses this, but once again, there's just no need to when you have the M1 Abrams. Let's finish off these American tanks before we go into the Israeli ones next episode. Starship, honestly a better Sheridan. For the same price, you get the same gun, you get a Shalala, but you get 10 armor. You're much slower, but you get 10 armor, right? It's not too shabby. Still only C tier, but the interesting one actually follows next. And that's this one, because you get an autocannon now, which is no high rate of fire autocannon. Really high rate of fire. Excuse me. Honestly, though, still only C tier, because it's so slow and just gets one shot so quickly. But my favorite one out of these is obviously the MV70. It has been in the spotlight for a brief moment, around the time when US became meta again, around like shortly after deal, or around the DLC-ish, you know, very roughly in that time frame, before, after. I think fairly shortly after the Israel DLC, I would say, US started to become really meta in 1v1s. But for a brief period of time, the MPT-70 was also a big part of that, you know. 10 RPM, 5 HE, good range, autocannon, again, high rate of fire, medium optics and all. 12 armor isn't the best, but, you know, you can at least retreat if you get really low on HP. So really good infantry DPS output. And I still think it's a good tank. It's just, once again, with the M1 Abrams around, there's just no need for it, you know? And all the other fire support that you have, that just a pure fire support vehicle, there's just no need anymore. It's just wasted points, because you have so many stronger options for other tanks, you know? You have the HC, the HA, the A2 that you kind of want to fit in. Maybe you want the AGS, and then of course very often you want to run 5 playing cards. You want to run 5 support cards, you know. So it's just poor little boy just can't find a home. That's all he wants, but nobody wants him. And that's episode 2, just 1 hour exactly. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Let me know what you think. No, insult me if you think I'm wrong, whatever. And I'll hopefully see you next time. See ya.